My Inner Knowing, empowering you to find your compass for the journey. We are dedicated to supporting you to rediscover and trust your natural ability to navigate life each day by sharing insight and experience through the lens of two professional communicators and their guests. We intend to prompt internal inquiry that supports all those willing to explore a unique path.
Well, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
Hi, Art.
Yeah. Hi, Art.
Hey guys. Hey, hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm glad to. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. Well, as you know from our conversation, exploring, that journey of our knowing inside of us. And when you think about what your knowing has been over the years and where it is now, how would you describe that in terms of your body, the emotions that you might feel when you're in your knowing or you're struggling to get to your knowing, and just what your process is?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think when we first talked about me coming on, I said it's probably don't fit the knowing very well, because I've been in kind of this phase of life as I hit 70 where I feel like I really just don't know anymore. So struggling through that. But to try to answer your question, I would say for me, from a body standpoint, I can tell when things are grounded and centered if there is an absence of a tightness in right above the belly, right in the solar plexus, up into the lower chest. If that's present, if I slow down long enough to sense that, then I know I've just gotten off center, and I'm just kind of operating out of autopilot.
Okay.
And there's a warning there. There's an anxiety that sits right there. And the truth is, I think I've experienced it my whole life.
Sure.
But my particular type of personality has been that I was able to ignore it for a very long time, well into my 40s. It went okay until it didn't,
Sure.
I'm in long-term recovery, and the old saying is, whatever your behavior or substance is, it works until it doesn't. And so that actually worked fairly well for me until the collapse came, when I couldn't outrun the feeling anymore.
Sure.
But my tendency all of my life has been to be a person who is overly optimistic, very kind of go fast, and always looking on the bright side of things, and it'll work out. Don't worry about it, and that kind of thing. And while that served me well in certain aspects of life, I was in sales, had my own mortgage business, and was a great salesperson and great at delivering customer service. So in some aspects of life, in some domains, that personality served me really well.
Sure.
But Walker, great question, because what was going on inside was I was outrunning it for so long, and when it finally hit, I mean, it was a bottom like no other. There was anxiety finally came to the surface, and I'd been pushing it back so long. Depression came with it. I'd never felt depressed a day in my life that I knew of, but boy, when it hit really heavily.
Wow. Yeah. What do you, as best you're aware, what do you think precipitated that shift for you in your 40s?
Well, that shift came in recovery. I had struggled secretly for most of my life, some with substance abuse, substance use disorder, however you want to call it. But beneath that was what I think the DSM-V would call a sexual addiction. And so that was hidden from everybody.
Okay.
And when I went into 12-step recovery, it wasn't for that.
Okay.
It was because 2 of my sons were addicted, and I thought they were going to die.
Oh.
And somebody said, you ought to go to Al-Anon. And I did.
Yeah.
But it was actually starting in there and trying to work the steps around the family issues, that there was a spiritual awakening that came out of the blue.
Wow.
That was the first time in my life at 49 that I'd ever felt a sense that, however you want to, that I was okay. That something in the universe, God, something said, "You're okay.
Yeah.
You're okay." I had never felt that deeply in my life before. That was a huge shift in my life. That's a demarcation. Everything before it was one way, and everything's after it has been different.
Wow.
Right?
And just
not
like
always better.
In a day. I mean, did it happen that fast, or is it over time? How was it?
Yeah, I mean, it was. Well, once it hits, it looks like it was just now. But
right, you'd been leading.
I don't. All of a sudden at once, right? But I'm sure there was just so much leading up to it that I didn't understand or know. But when it hit that night, it was out of the blue.
Would you share more with us about what happened?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm fascinated.
As I said, I was by that time I had actually gotten into a 12-step group to work on my own issues. And in the middle of that work, all of a sudden there was a compelling evening. A day started where I was, from the moment I got up, I was angry. And I couldn't tell you why. There was nothing about the day that was a problem. It actually was a beautiful day that looked like it had all the promise in the world. But the longer I went through the day, the more angry I became.
Yeah.
For no reason. And by the end of the day, it got so bad, my wife just said, I don't know what's going on, but I just can't be around you right now. And I remember leaving the house, going into the pitch black darkness. And pre-recovery, I used to smoke a pack or two a day.
Sure.
But when we got married, my wife said I can't live with a smoker. So I stopped smoking regularly, but I always hid a pack somewhere just in case I needed one. And a few times a year I'd pull, well, this was one of those times.
Yeah.
And I sat there chain smoking cigarettes in the dark. And that moment when you say all at once, yes, it was all at once. There was a voice, a sense of God saying, it's okay. You're okay. I've got it. It's time to tell the truth.
Wow.
And I'm like, I don't know how long I sat there. I really don't know. It seemed like a long time. I don't think it was that long. Thinking, there's no way. I've gone 40-something years hiding all of this, going to great lengths. There's no way I can tell. And it was like, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
And my wife will tell you the story, her part of it too, is that somewhere in that night, somewhere in that hour, the door opened and she walked out in the dark and sat down and said, is there something you're supposed to tell me?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, there is. And if it hadn't been dark, I couldn't have told her.
Yeah.
Because there was still a lot of shame attached, even after that awakening, right?
Yeah, of course.
So,
of course.
Yeah. But I did the best I could at that point. Then the hard work started. The hard work started.
Yeah, I think we want it to be sunshine and roses if that moment comes like that, but it's just a start.
And we knew enough to know we were going to have to get some help, and I was going to have to go deeper. But you're right. There was that moment there, or day or two, or cloud, pink cloud almost. But we knew just enough to know I'm going to have to go deeper, and she's going to have to go deeper.
Yeah.
And so, to her credit, as the non-addict in the family, she dug in and did the most amazing inner journey of step work of anybody I've ever seen that wasn't, quote, the addict.
Wow. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
So we were very fortunate in that I always say I was tricked into recovery, but that we were in it at the same time and doing our work at the same time. That's rare in a way.
Yeah.
It was a gift. It was it was a real gift. to us. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you thinking, babe?
It's lovely. Just that, you guys, the universe puts you in that space in the dark so the shame would stop you. I mean, just all the pieces were moving there. And then her willingness to step in relationship to something that was really hard.
Yeah.
And stay with it, like you said.
Yeah. When I tell the story, I don't tell it as often as I used to, but in recovery circles, we had a lot of chance later. And even in churches in public and whatever to tell which was kind of weird, but so I don't tell it as that much anymore. But even telling it to you now, I think what you just said is true. There's so many pieces that came together when I look back. Without that confluence, I just don't know if or when I would ever have been able to start on the journey.
Mm. Well, it sounds like the universe was conspiring for you.
That's the way it feels to me. That's the way it felt then, and I still believe that. And that was over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I think about, that process then that you stepped into, the knowing piece of that, like, do you remember trying to use your knowing as part of your recovery process, or was that not so high enough up in your consciousness that you really were aware of it at that point?
I think at that time, the only thing I was aware of at a deep level was just the sense of freedom, the sense of joy.
Mm.
It was like I was alive for the first time.
Mm.
And I dug in and did a lot of really good work, a lot of hard work, and then became known as someone who could help other people do the work. Right.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So began sponsoring, and began leading groups and so forth and so on. But I don't think, to answer your question, as vivid as that was to me when it happened, and as much as that launched the journey,
Yeah.
I don't think I was aware and stayed tapped into that.
Yeah.
Which I think probably leads to the other part of the story later on,
Okay.
years later, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Probably about 10 years in to sobriety and recovery. And I think I had kind of, I would say, fallen back asleep in the sense. It wasn't that I was relapsing into the behaviors. That wasn't happening.
Right.
But the ego, I think, had gotten back in control, as you might say.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think I wasn't ready for the next hit that came, which is more what we described earlier with the not being able to outrun the pain and the negative emotions and the deprivation of life that I'd never quite healed very well.
Yeah.
And I just thought going faster would do it.
Yeah.
And it didn't. It just made it worse.
Yeah.
So I used to tell people, I can't go tell my story as much anymore because there's two bottoms. Usually there's one bottom, right? Yeah. But for me, it's like there's these two bottoms. One having to do with the addictive behavior.
Yeah.
But then the second one, gosh, about 12 years ago, it was a totally different thing. Kind of a dark night of the soul that was even worse than the addictive bottom.
Wow.
In that it was much more almost existential, if you will, when that depression and all hit. That was a first time questioning, not whether I was good, but whether life was worth living, even.
Yeah. Yeah. How was that process different than the first one in regards to how you chose to keep stepping forward?
Good question. It took the debilitating. I remember sitting with a friend of mine who was a therapist because I was starting to try to work on what was going on, but the bottom hadn't hit yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm working through it. And one session, he says, "Well, you're depressed." And I said, no, that's not the problem. I got a problem, but that's not the problem. Says the guy with no things behind his head that said he was trained, to the guy that had several behind his head.
Yeah.
And I said, I do have a problem, but that's not the problem.
You're right.
He said, no. He said, no, you're depressed.
Mm.
Well, so, you know, in the Enneagram world, you and I were talking earlier about, but
yeah,
I would identify as a 0.7 personality set.
Sure,
right? Sure. You can read all the books you want, listen to all the trainings about the type 7,
right.
and it can all be theoretical, but I had about 55 years plus of evidence to go, oh yeah.
Yeah.
That before I knew what that was, that's what that was.
Yeah.
So I was still trying to outrun it, right?
Yeah.
Still trying to outrun it. That was what he was trying to point out to me.
Right.
All the anxiety was catching up, and I was just doubling down, kind of unhealthy 7 behavior, just to keep doing more and more and consuming more and going faster, right?
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, the only thing that stopped me, I think, was the depression. And then having to say that when he said, you know, we probably ought to get you to a doctor, get you on some medicine. And, you know, then I was like, no, you got the wrong diagnosis. About a month later, I was begging to get to because I really, at that point, didn't know how to do life very much and was even thinking it was time for me not to live.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the only thing I think that really slowed me down. And I reached out to an old friend from recovery, he had become my best friend. I had sponsored him when he got out of rehab many years earlier. And then we had become best friends. And so the relationship changed. And I just called him and I said, I'll never forget. I mean, I started to tear up now. I just said, hey, one of the things we had in common, we were the same age and we had grown up as basketball junkies. I mean, just that's one of the reasons we related so much.
Oh.
We both ate, dreamed, slept, played it all of our life. And so I just called him up and I said, hey, you think you could come across town and we could go play some? And he said, sure, just tell me when and where.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm tearing up thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he would drive across town and meet me in the gym and most of the time I would just sit and cry.
Oh.
I would try to shoot, but by then I was on Zoloft or something. And so it wasn't working real well. You know, most of the time it was talking, walking, trying to play, and then sitting down and just crying and him listening. Yeah. So I began to humble myself in the sense of I just need help.
Yeah.
And I need people. And I need to admit that I can't always make everything be okay and everything happy.
Yeah.
And so that was the beginning of a long year. Stayed on the meds, which I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Every week we would sit and try to play and talk and cry and, you know, kept my regular appointments with a therapist. Just slowly but surely took a long time, began to come back to life a little bit and feel like, no, it is worth living. There is a future. But I did do something I'd never done before, which was I quit saying yes and doing everything that I could do to outrun it.
Yeah.
And stop being the one that led everything and the one that taught everything and the one that knew everything. Just had to actually be for a while.
Yeah.
And that was new to me. I'd never done that. Yeah.
What was the struggle in that process of letting go of that ego? You know, the ego was protecting you, but, you know, you're having to let it go through that process. So what was it like to be able to let that go?
It was incredibly difficult at times to not want to get back in that role as, you know, like Mr. Recovery, right? Everybody had begun to look up to me. I'm leading these groups. I'm sponsoring these people. I'm teaching. I'm writing. It was kind of tough. That was crushing. And even I remember even in we had started a new recovery ministry in a church plant. And this is right before the collapse.
Mm.
I was running small groups in this church startup. I would preach every once in a while. I was starting this ministry and working full time in the mortgage business besides all that,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And I remember when I was in the early part of the collapse and having to just stop doing things. To your question, I remember a guy walked over to me and said something about Pastor Art, and I just looked at him and I said, "Don't call me that. I'm not that."
Yeah.
He was like, "Whoa."
Yeah.
He didn't know what was going on. But that was what you're talking about, was that pain of letting go of those identities.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I had to.
Mm.
I had to. And it scared me that he called me that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It both scared me and angered me, I'm sure, at the same time, right? Because I'm not that. No, don't call me that. I'm not that. It was difficult to keep, because I really did feel like I was losing who I was.
Right.
I was too tired and depressed to outrun it anymore, but I was still having to die kind of that death right there.
Right.
While I'm figuring out how to actually medically help the depression, spiritually and mentally help the depression and that type of thing. And it was just like, that's a weird world
Yeah.
to be in, or at least it was for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the kind of guy that gets depressed. I'm the kind of guy that gives depression to everybody. I'm a carrier. I'm not, if you know the 7 personality, right?
Right.
Yeah, we're immune to that, right?
Yeah.
And so I couldn't calculate all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What other stories do you think had to go or you chose to let go of during that time, other than the identity piece? What do you feel like you were holding or carrying that your body just said, enough, I can't do this anymore?
Yeah, a lot of it had to do with broken relationships, ones that by then I thought would have been repaired. I did everything in the world I thought you could do to repair them.
Okay.
And then one out of the blue ended that there was no clue it was going to end.
Yeah.
And it was like one thing after another piled up, right? And so part of what I had to learn to let go of when I got a little healthier was this grandiose idea that I could make all of those relationships whole again. I could heal all these folks and we would have the relationships that I wanted.
Yeah.
That was tough to let go of that. I didn't realize how much of that had been going on.
Sure.
In terms of denying the pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so having to come to a reality that I might end my life without those things being restored.
Yeah.
That was a hard truth, a hard reality to come to. The other one was that I might not actually ever find the dream job or the thing that I was meant to do on this earth and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That one was so inner. As bad as the other stuff was, that was scary. That was really scary.
Yeah. Tell us more about that. Because I think it's something, Art, that, people struggle with frequently. Like, what am I here to do? And I want to make sure I'm doing it. And how do I
know?
How do I know? And
Yeah. Well, one of the elements of that second bottom that we were just talking about was that out of the blue, this was all the data leading into the crash. Okay.
Yeah.
One of the data pieces was out of nowhere, seemingly.
Yeah.
Somebody says, "Hey, we hear that you want to be a recovery pastor. And we have created that job in our church, and we think you might be good at it." Now, all the elements were coming together in the sense of they drew this job up better than I could for me. And I had been successful in business, had my own small business, but it had nothing to do with who I was. It was just what I did, right?
Right.
When I tell you that everything changed after when I got sober and that awakening hit, everything did change.
Mm-hmm.
And so for years, for a decade, I was like, I should be working in the recovery field in some way. I should be, especially as it's related to a spiritual journey.
Okay.
For years, while I kept working in the mortgage, but it was like, when is somebody going to notice this? Every time I would try to, it just didn't work. But I was okay because I was still younger, right? And I'm still working. But as I got into my 50s and this other stuff was going on, and then this guy pops in and says this, and I'm like, okay, there it is, finally, right?
Yeah.
This is what's going to save me.
Yeah.
And a huge church, one of the biggest churches in the country, in another state, 3 states away.
Yeah.
We would have had to move. But my wife and I she actually encouraged me she said, you got to go for this. You got to go for it. I did, thinking, I'm not sure how far I'm going to get. I have no degrees. I have no formal training.
Yeah.
And this is a huge church that runs itself like a Fortune 500 HR.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they started interviewing me, and then there was another interview, and then every time there'd be more people on the phone.
Sure.
And then it was like, I keep making the cut, and then it was like, we'd like to fly your wife and you up here. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Go through all that. And by that point, my heart was already there.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Everything about me was already there.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, I went back to this mundane work that I hated. And I got the call, and the first thing the HR person said was, well, just wanted to make sure there weren't any expenses from your trip that we didn't reimburse you for. And when she said that, I was like, this is not going to go well.
Oh.
And sure enough, she's like, well, I just want to let you know we decided to go in another direction.
Oh.
And I mean, I just, boom, and got off the phone. I remember I just started walking from the building and just walked for a mile or two, called sponsor and recovery, talking about it. But I did the typical, for those that know type 7, I did the typical 7 thing. Put it away.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done. It's good.
Right.
Let me do 5 more things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And about that time, I got approached to be part of a 4-person team to plant that church and do all that work. And we'll start a recovery ministry. I'm like, yep, I'm good. Ready to go.
Yeah.
So that job thing, I've never before, never since, is there ever been, it's not like I went after a lot of jobs in my life, but I never didn't get, if I went after it.
Sure.
That one I didn't. And when I called the guy that wanted me to come and said, hey, can you tell me what happened? He said, I don't know. They loved you. They decided not to even create the position.
Wow.
So I don't even know what to tell you.
Right.
But I buried it, kept going, and went faster again. And so I tell you that is because it's the only time in my life there was ever something like that was like, oh my gosh, that's me. And they want me to do it, and I'm going to do it.
Right.
And then that became part of that whole crash story.
Yeah.
It was one of the last elements, I think.
Sure.
So that's a long answer to your question about what else did I have to let go. And that was kind of the sense of there's a perfect recovery spiritual job out there for you.
Right.
And you're going to find it, and it's going to save you.
Right.
And yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I just, to put it in religious terms, I just, the Job, and it's like having, I don't know, it's, how did you keep yourself from going or staying in that place, which is the victim? I've done all these things and now this on top of the rest. I thought it was the answer. The just crushing disappointment. How'd you deal with that?
Well, that's the thing. I wasn't dealing with it. Mm-hmm. All those things I've told you were mounting up the whole time. Again, without trying to be, pedantic about the Enneagram. When I look back, you can see classic 7.
Yeah.
not dealing with pain,
Right.
not dealing with anything that's frustrating or slows me down. I wasn't processing it. I was experiencing it, but I wasn't processing it.
Right.
And I just kept going faster and faster. So I wasn't dealing with it. That's what you do a post-mortem on something like that.
Right.
You can never be exactly sure all the elements, but with all these years later, I look back and I'm like, I think I can kind of see most of the threads, and all those things I mentioned were happening over time. And then that final thing, and then final relationship busted, and something in me I was worn out, let go, so that's what led to the bottom, I think.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Your body said enough. I cannot hold one more thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I'm more of a head type. I got a body and I got emotions, but I'd prefer to do life through my head if I can. Thanks. Right. And not being aware of that back then.
Yeah.
Everything was about classic planning for the future and speeding things up so that I didn't have to feel the pain of the present. Right.
Right.
I look back and it's almost humorous because, I should have been more aware than anybody as a recovering person, 12-step person, and a believer. I should have been more aware than almost anybody on the planet of what was going on, and actually not get so ambushed.
Oh,
it's almost funny. If it wasn't so painful, it would be funny.
Yeah. The expectations we can hold ourselves to. Yeah.
Yep.
And we're just human. Yeah.
I wasn't aware at that time. I wasn't conscious enough about ego patterns at that time.
Sure.
Before I was I was introduced to the Enneagram 2009, but didn't start doing the hard work, the inner work, until a few years later after the crash.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, I don't mean by that, if I'd have known, I wouldn't have crashed. That's I don't mean to pass that off to people, right?
Right.
Y'all familiar with Kate? You familiar with Kate Bowler's work?
I don't think so.
Yeah, the Duke professor she wrote one of her books I love is the name of it is Everything Happens for a Reason in Other Lives, I believe. And I think about that when I'm trying to look. If I had, it happened for this, and people would say, but you wouldn't trade it for the world. I'm like, hell yeah, I wouldn't want. I would not go through that again. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
If we were in the same room, I'd high five you right now. So.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, somebody in church did that to me, and I was like, no.
Yeah.
I would trade it, believe me.
Yeah.
It scared the hell out of me.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
If we could figure out how to talk to each other about that, I appreciate the growth that came from those things, but if I could have the growth without all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I saw, it took a while, but one of the things I saw, and again, I don't want to make a one-to-one causation correlation. God did that, so you would get this. I don't like that. But one of the things that happened as a result was my heart became so tender. And again, I'm tearing up thinking about it.
Yeah.
It became so much more tender to people not like me.
Yes.
That did struggle regularly with anxiety or depressive moods or sadness or whatever.
Yeah.
It showed me how unconsciously arrogant I had been at times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Insensitive to that in other people.
Yeah.
And so one of the growth things that did come out of it took a year or so but I finally, it just hit me. My wife even said to me, you're so much more tender to people. Now, you were always good with people. You were helpful, but you were often helping them out of your own personality, your own ego, your own speed. Right? And sometimes that was great. That's all they needed. But she said, you're so much more tender to folks that are not built like you.
Yeah.
That don't have that type of so that was a gem that came out of it. But yeah, it was hard. It was hard won. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said that was about 13, 14 years ago?
12, 13.
12, 13 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we were talking about, when we spoke the first time about the last 10 years, what has that? So that was 12, 13 years ago. And then obviously there's this period in there, and then something shifted.
Well, there was a slower shift that's been happening in terms of, I'm going to guess that a lot of it had to do with starting to do the inner work through with the Enneagram.
Yeah.
The more spiritual journey, not kind of like the pop level, but
yeah,
a more
deep,
spiritual journey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I can only say that they somehow do correlate time-wise, and that was a change. So, part of it has been still even to this day, even to this very hour, that longing for finding what it is I'm meant to do and then do it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that are around me wouldn't guess that. Most of the people wouldn't get it. It's just on the inner circle. They kind of know that angst that's still with me.
Yeah.
About this long held belief that I would never know what it is I was meant to do and then do it. Right. And so even as I'll be 70 here in a few months, and this is the heaviest thing that hangs over me still. And I told you before, when you said we're going to talk about inner knowing, I'm like, this is probably not a good time. I'm not going to be a good example for you. Because right now, these last few years, especially, the 10 years really marked coming out of the funk. And then the last 5 years of my career working, and then deciding 6 years ago, with the encouragement of my wife, to actually started a small nonprofit to try to do whatever it is that I do.
Yeah.
And so have been doing Enneagram coaching and counseling and recovery work with families and individuals for the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Right. The more current thing in terms of my knowing is that it feels like I don't know anything anymore, in terms of I'm at that place, whether it's a stage of faith or a state, I don't know, but I'm at this place where I told somebody today, I said, I feel like I'm either the healthiest unhealthy person in the world or the most unhealthy healthy person in the world, because it feels like something in me is growing and growing and growing, but there's this outer that seems like you just can't get it right.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of frustration. I don't know if that answers your question.
It's helpful, Art. When you talk just then about the outer, what were you referring to? The outer that you can't get quite right.
Yeah, I would say it's more the structure or the frame of what I'm doing, every day. The sense of, it's almost like when that guy said that about that job I told you about. When I read the thing, I'm like, okay, this is me. They didn't even know it. It's better than what I dreamed up. It's like now I'm still looking for that.
Right. Attachment. Yeah.
And so I've learned, because of what happened 12 years ago.
Yeah.
I've learned how to deal with it better, to go ahead and process it well before it does take me down again.
Right.
And so I'm doing that regularly with people. But there's still this sense of my time has passed. I didn't make my mark, and I'm never gonna. Right. And again, it's easy for me to say, oh, that's just ego. But there's still something there that's kind of painful about that, and pretty frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I'm not sure it's exactly answering your question, but even in matters of spirituality and faith, I still think that there's something there that's growing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's this outer frustration with it that it hasn't caught up yet.
Yeah.
And so I'm in one of those, for lack of a better word, I guess, the James Fowler classic stages of faith. And it feels like I'm going spiraling down when it may well be that I'm spiraling up. I don't know. Yeah. So I can be a very frustrating person to be around. Let me just say that.
We're complex, all of us.
We are so complex. And what's interesting, Art, when I think about, what you've shared. And this makes me teary. It is so rare for us, if we ever even have the opportunity, to feel like we've been seen so clearly. And that job description was that for you. You've mentioned it that way several times so far. And it would be so difficult to set that experience aside and not hope for it again. And I'm not saying we can't, right? But I don't know that most of us ever experienced that. And so to have it, because I know, for myself, Art, when I was younger, I was always looking for the person to show me who I was. Always. And if I felt like somebody did see me clearly, then I'm like, tell me more about myself, right? And then, to have that job description laid out in front of you and you're like, whoa, this is like the perfect thing for me. They know me better than me, right?
Yeah. I don't even think I ever asked them how much they would pay. I didn't care.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
Because it didn't matter, right? It didn't matter.
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
So I can understand the attachment, piece and, wanting to, like you said, like your body's still working through that. And, to me, I think, is it like when you talk about this part that's growing and like there's that awareness there, right? Which I think is your knowing. I mean, your knowing knows something's growing.
I agree with you. I think that's true. As best I can tell, I think that's very true. And it's kind of like I can't get the inner and the outer to actually
the congruence
merge.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, the other thing that comes to mind as you're sharing is, do I trust myself?
Yeah. Again, I'll go with some theory here. And the Enneagram's not the only wisdom system that says this, but but it's predictable that, especially for the head types, and 7 is a head type, that the trusting the inner knowing is the most difficult for head types. Everybody else has different problems, but that's a big one. And I would say absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. When you first came home, the reason I was sensing 8 was, boy, she's got that gut knowing. She's just got whatever. She may be a serial killer, but she's got that gut. I don't know about how she is with everybody, but I can just feel it. And my wife's a type 1, right? So she has the same thing in a different form. And I remember asking her a few years ago, I said, hey, do you ever struggle with this not knowing? And she thought first, she went, nah. And I'm like, damn, I just wish just for a day, to have that, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know that I would answer the same way as your wife, about mine. I feel like it's, cultivated for sure, over my lifetime, and definitely, wow, that's like a really interesting question, Art, because yes, the knowing's always been there. Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it I didn't know how to value it. I no doubt valued it incorrectly. And
Yeah.
I thought because I was often correct that I was right about everything when I was younger. And so I really had to learn about that piece.
Yeah.
And I wanted to not harm people. And so I had a lot of, like when I was 13, I was like, okay, I don't want this energy of aggression anymore. I need to, be different. And actually we just recorded that one, I Will Fight No More Forever. It was an episode.
I saw that one. Yeah. I saw that.
And that was my, choice,
What I would be interested, can you describe what your shift was toward? What was the different identity?
Sure. So the different identity was observer.
Okay.
And then to not have as much of a voice.
Yeah.
Because the voice was, people didn't like it.
Yeah.
I tell the story in one of the episodes that when I got married, the priest at my wedding said, if you know Theresa, like I know Theresa, you'll pray for her husband.
Yeah.
And so, and I was raised Catholic and they did not appreciate, my voice. And so.
Right. I found it's very difficult for female aides. Was born in Birmingham, Alabama, and really, because I didn't get that job, I never left, So around here, Bible Belt, I have friends, female aide friends, and I feel for them.
Yeah.
They, almost to a person, they've had to suppress their power, their voice in the church and so forth. So I think I kind of know a little bit about what you're talking with different details, perhaps.
Yeah. And I think I just, because I was the fifth of 8 kids, I think my parents didn't know what to do with me. And so I think that benefited me in that regard because they didn't have the energy to shut me down all the time. There were.
Yeah.
And so there were other
exhausted.
They were exhausted. There were other people that tried that, but I had really good mentors when I was in my late teens and early 20s, which I think made such a huge difference in my life.
Yeah, I bet.
Who really did, I think, I had this one mentor and I think he was the first person that ever helped me see me.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Beautiful.
And he did it so kindly. And, he wrote out 4 pages of amazing things that I did. And then his only criticism was that I took things personally, which I took personally.
And he called you out on it.
And he called me out.
Well, I mean, that's so beautiful about I think I unconsciously trained everybody in my life to not think I needed mentoring.
Sure.
While I had this longing for who's the person, who's going to come and lead me, who's going to coach me, who's going to save me, who's going to whatever it was.
Oh yeah.
But the irony of it was, I think unconsciously, the way I presented myself to the world.
Yeah.
Nobody would think we need to check on Art.
Right. Oh,
Art needs leading. To this day, I think that's the process. I think that's where I'm at now. Is like, you know what? I'm going to have to go back and allow somebody to do that at a deeper level.
Yeah.
How do you feel about trying to do that at 70?
Oh, wow. I can feel the constriction coming up right now just because I mentioned it, but I'm going to do it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm in a process and I'm doing it. And I'm trying to do it just for the sake of being rather than doing, which is hard for me.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of doing it right now, consciously choosing, to go through that, hoping that maybe that'll lead to a little bit of a breakthrough where the other stuff's not so frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
The therapist is like, yeah, it's going to take some time. And I'm like, do you not listen to me? I'm 70. I don't have any. Are you not listening? He's like, yeah, I heard you.
It's it's interesting, Art. As a trauma therapist and just in doing my own work, I recognize how important it was for me to do the experiential piece to release things, from my body. And over the years, I've done a lot of different things. working through that. I would say my most significant, or the thing that I probably did the longest was, hitting a 70-pound hanging bag with a piece of a high pressure water hose. Anytime I felt anxiety or fear or frustration or confusion, sometimes I could hit the bag and speak what I wanted to out of my body. And sometimes I couldn't. I would just say, whatever this is, get out. Like, I don't know what the story is attached here, but get out. And, doing that was, hitting the bag was very hard for me because I had decided to not be aggressive anymore when I was a teen. And so I really had to work on my story about understanding I was moving energy. I wasn't being aggressive. I was just trying to get out everything I had stuffed down.
Yeah.
Setting intention while you do it.
Oh, yeah. Setting an intention. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're just wallowing.
I like that.
In aggression.
Yeah. I like that phrase. I think I thought you said with the shifting of the energy.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Just shifting it, just recognizing, that my body, was doing its best to protect me. And, it's trying to keep me alive, do it as efficiently as possible. And I don't know that it's really thinking, I wonder how this will impact Theresa tomorrow. I don't think it's thinking that. It's just like, okay, well, she'll be alive tomorrow because we did what we needed to do. And then about a year ago, I came across a device called a shift wave chair. And the 7s that I work with love it. That's why I'm bringing it up. They're not common. So I don't know that there would be one in Birmingham, but it is, when I got in it the first time, Art, I was like, whoo, this person knew what they were doing. So it's basically like 18 vibrotactile stimulators in a 0-degree gravity chair that moves your body in all these waves and patterns while it's doing bilateral stimulation, while you're doing breath work, while you're doing guided visualization, all at the same time. It's powerful.
So it's a subset of the larger neurofeedback field.
Yeah, it is like a biofeedback device because it's body focused, not brainwave focused.
Not brainwave.
Yeah. But my gosh, the people that are, really. Yeah.
Well, so now you got me wanting to come to Kansas City.
Well, you do are, absolutely. You can
You'll
stay.
me, right?
You stay a few days, and we'll be glad for you to try it out. Fascinating. I have a woman client that was a 6 today. She got it in it for the first time, and I just did the 10-minute intro, and I had to go into my next session. And she finished. I said, "How was it?" And she said, "I don't want to get out." And I said, "Well, how about I turn on another protocol? I need to step into session, but you're welcome to stay." And so she stayed and did another session in the chair.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I just think it can give your body like a contrast because it also does that. Like it'll be like moving your body and all these rhythms and patterns and then absolute stillness. And so you actually learn a contrast too about your body, what it feels like in stillness. And if we have a hard time knowing what stillness feels like, even in meditation, it can teach us about our body. To me, it is a teaching device about our body. So you want to come, Art? You are welcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like that. Hey, don't forget, I'm a 7. So I may end up on your door.
And I'm an 8, and I mean it.
You got a big one. Yeah.
She gets stuff done. She moves so much faster than me. It's crazy. We'll talk about something, and I'm like, well, I'm going to think about that for a few days. And then she's already like 10 steps down the road.
Oh, yeah. My wife is very similar from a different it's like,
she's a doer.
Why are you still... I'm trying to come up with more options, right? She's like, I thought we decided let's.
I want to also, Art, clarify, I asked the question about, at 70, looking for a mentor and doing that, allowing that piece. And the reason I asked you was not to, I hope you didn't take it the wrong way about 70, because at 56, I've always wanted what Theresa's experience was, and I've never had anybody professionally, step in and do that for me. And so there's a whole, there's a worthiness piece, all that stuff. But at 56, I'm kind of like, nobody's gonna be interested in helping me out now, So it gives me,
you got 13 more years.
Well, I'm just telling you, that's why I asked the question, and it gives me hope. It's just, it's a really nice example. Good. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, thanks for saying that. That helps. That helps me a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. We all need hope. You know?
Well, that I think what you just said, hope has been the struggle for me.
Yeah.
Right. For a while. And so when that bottom came 12, 13 years ago, I remember turning over in bed one night, and it was, I'll just use the religious metaphor. It was as if Satan could stand there and say, that moment I said, there's no hope. There's no, that had never happened to me.
Yeah.
That was the bottom of the bottom.
Yeah.
So now I'm struggling with the same thing, but in a much healthier way, right? But hope deferred makes the heart sick, right? So, so I'm okay, all right. I know how better to face this consciously now, and as a result, I think I'm consistently treating people more kindly.
Yeah.
I'm staying conscious to most of the time really well to outside relationships.
Yeah.
Even as I'm still battling that sense of hopelessness in a way.
Yeah.
Or I'm running out of time.
Sure.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for us to find the thing that works for us, to help us know that there's always time. But we're really good liars to ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Very effective. Yeah.
And I can't get away with using the word time with Joel.
Right. Oh, I bet.
Don't even try.
Yeah, Dr. Joel Bennett, the guest we had on. Yeah. Oh, yeah. All his time books, which are wonderful. It was such a great increase of awareness in my consciousness. Like it moved that piece up a little bit so that, I could be more intentional about time. Yeah. Art, thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure, Art. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I've really enjoyed being with you guys. I hope this isn't the only time that we actually get to meet or talk or go forward. Y'all both intrigued me, so I hope to hear more.
Get your ticket.
Thank you. That's right. Drive, fly, whatever, Art. Yeah. Yeah. Well, sincerely. Yeah.
It's Theresa is always exploring new modalities of helping people and is always offering, and just, I'm sure her heart was singing when you're like, well, I might just have to come to Kansas City. She's like,
yes, it was. There's a big,
it's
really nice.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to. Maybe we can make that work.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for having me.
Thank you, Art. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to explore life with you. We encourage curiosity, self-growth, and we strive to be more compassionate every day.